I never imagined the day would start with pancakes and end with a hospital bracelet. Saturday morning in Fair Oaks, California is quiet. The kind of quiet you start to crave in your late 60s, once the grandkids stop visiting as much and your phone doesn't ring quite like it used to. I live alone in a modest ranch-style house. 3 bedrooms, white shutters, a little front porch with a creaky swing. Charles and I bought it in '84. He passed 10 years ago, but the place still feels like ours. That morning, I decided to treat myself. I pulled out the Bisquick, cracked 2 eggs, and started making pancakes. I even added blueberries, though they were a little wrinkled. Old habits. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and sat at the table with the windows open, letting the late April breeze drift in. Then it started. Not the drama, the pressure. Right beneath my breastbone. Not stabbing, more like something was sitting on my chest. Not full-blown pain, but a heaviness. I thought maybe it was acid reflux. I'd skipped dinner the night before and eaten toast too fast that morning. But then it spread. My left shoulder, my jaw. I stood up and felt my knees go soft. My breathing shortened like someone had tied a cord around my ribs. That's when I knew. Something was wrong, really wrong. I grabbed my cell phone from the kitchen counter. No signal. We've had spotty reception since the last storm knocked out a nearby cell tower. I walked slowly to the living room, sat on the couch, and connected to Wi-Fi. Then I did what anyone would do in that moment. I called my son. Daniel answered after a couple of rings, upbeat. I could hear laughter and music in the background. "Hey, Mom, we're just heading out Ashley's birthday brunch downtown. What's up?" His voice hit me like a cold wave. I'd forgotten. His wife, Ashley, was turning 32. They'd planned a whole weekend around it. Winery tours, a hotel in Napa, brunch with her yoga friends. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Danny, I think I'm having a heart attack. I need to go to the hospital." There was a pause. Just a second or two. Then his tone changed, but not how I expected. "Wait, right now?" "Yes," I said quietly, my breath shallow. "I've called 911. The ambulance is on its way. I wanted you to know." Okay. Look, let me know what they say, all right? I'll try to check in after the brunch, see how you're doing. Just keep me updated." My son. My only child. I was telling him I thought I might be dying, and he was balancing me against bottomless mimosas. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. "All right," I whispered. "Just thought you should know." He said, "Yeah, keep me posted," and hung up. It took the ambulance 11 minutes to get to me. The EMTs were kind, gentle. They checked my vitals, helped me breathe through the panic, strapped me to the gurney. One of them asked if I had anyone meeting me at Mercy General. I said, "My son's at his wife's birthday party." The EMT looked at me for a second longer than he probably should have. In the ER, they confirmed it. An acute coronary syndrome, likely caused by a blockage. They needed to do a cardiac catheterization immediately. No time for prep, no time to wait. The last thing I remember before they wheeled me in was a nurse asking if I had someone to call. "He knows," I said. "He knows I'm here." When I woke up in recovery, it was dark. My mouth tasted like plastic. I had oxygen tubes in my nose and IVs in both arms. A heart monitor beeped steadily next to me. I turned my head to the door. No one. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. One message. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. Ashley's dinner ran late and I had too much wine to drive. How are you feeling?" Not even a call. Not even a question about whether I made it out of surgery. I didn't reply. I lay there under those fluorescent lights with a tight bandage on my chest and a looser one around my heart. I had raised that boy. Sat up with him through croup and chicken pox. Worked night shifts and baked birthday cakes and held his hand through his divorce before Ashley came along. And now I was nothing more than a text after brunch. I stayed in that hospital bed for 3 more days. Not once did he visit. Not once did she call. Nurses came, physical therapists came, but my son? Nothing. Then Thursday morning, I was discharged. I called a Lyft. The driver was kind, helped me into the house, even carried my small hospital bag in. I tipped him $20 and waved as he drove off. Then I stood in the living room and looked around like I was seeing it all for the first time. The quiet was no longer peaceful. It was loud. It was hollow. That evening, I finally checked my phone again. There was another message from Daniel. "Hey, we're doing a little dinner for Ashley on Saturday. Some of her family's coming into town. It's at that new Italian place, Firenze. You're welcome to swing by if you're feeling up to it." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just an invitation, like nothing had happened. And that was when I decided I was going. Not because I'd forgiven anything, but because sometimes a mother doesn't stay silent just to keep the peace. Sometimes we speak through action, and I had a very special surprise to bring to that dinner. The hardest part wasn't the surgery. It was sitting at home for those 3 days after being discharged, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick above the fireplace. Nobody called. Not Daniel. Not Ashley. Not even one of those casual check-ins from her side of the family who used to wave when I drop off gifts. It was like I'd flatlined socially too. Thursday afternoon, I shuffled slowly from the living room to the hallway mirror. My color was returning, but my eyes still looked bruised by something deeper. Grief, maybe. Not just from the heart scare, yet, but the realization that when I needed my son most, he'd chosen balloons and cake over a hospital bed. That night, as the sun dipped behind the oak trees in my backyard, I took out a cream-colored envelope from the drawer under my mantel. It had my lawyer's name on the flap and my updated living will and testament inside. I'd signed it earlier that year after a routine colonoscopy had led to some worrying scans. False alarm. But now, as I reread it, how everything would go to Daniel, the house, the savings, my small art collection, I felt uneasy. It's strange how one weekend can show you everything about a person. I didn't shred it. I didn't light it on fire dramatically like in the movies. No, I placed the envelope on the mantel where my son would see it if he ever bothered to visit, with a yellow post-it that read, "Her might want to reread this." Then I sat down and thought. I wasn't trying to be vengeful. I wasn't trying to ruin Ashley's birthday. But they needed to feel what I'd felt. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Sometimes the only way people see the cracks in their behavior is when they finally hear it said out loud, or when it shows up wearing lipstick and pearls at their party. So I RSVP'd silently in my mind. I was going to that dinner, but I wouldn't be going empty-handed. Saturday came faster than expected. I didn't feel strong, not really, but I looked the part. I wore my navy wrap dress, the one Daniel once said made me look like an expensive lawyer on a Netflix show. I slipped on low heels and dabbed on my late husband's favorite perfume. Not for anyone else, just for me, to feel solid, grounded. I also carried a slim gift wrap box in soft gold paper. Inside was the surprise. It wasn't petty, it wasn't cruel, but it was personal, thoughtful even, and sharp in the way truth often is. My Lyft pulled into the parking lot of Firenze right on time, 6:25 p.m. The place was buzzing with wine glasses and birthday laughter, fairy lights twinkling along the patio, and clinking silverware echoing from inside. I spotted Daniel before he saw me. He was wearing that navy sport coat Ashley bought him from Nordstrom. His hair was perfectly tousled. He was laughing, smiling. Not a trace of concern on his face. Not a single wrinkle from worry. Then he turned, and his face dropped, like a man watching a ghost walk out of traffic. "Mom?" I smiled. "Evening, Daniel. I hope I'm not late." Ashley looked up from the cake in front of her. A massive round of sparkler candles had just been extinguished. She froze. Her friends all followed her gaze. I took my time approaching the table, every eye on me. "I brought a little something for the birthday girl," I said sweetly, setting the gold-wrapped box down gently in front of her plate. The table was silent. Daniel stood up, his voice low and unsure. "Mom, I didn't think you'd actually... you just had Serge." Yes, I had emergency heart surgery less than a week ago, I said, turning slightly to the rest of the table. But when your son doesn't show up at the hospital, doesn't call, doesn't even ask how you're doing, you start to think maybe you're not welcome anywhere anymore. So I decided to make an appearance before disappearing entirely. Ashley's smile cracked. I didn't know you'd gone to the hospital. Of course not, dear, I said. You were busy blowing out candles while I was being wheeled into an operating room. Then I gestured at the gift. I brought something special, though. It's personal, from the heart, you could say. She hesitated, then slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a small framed photo. A photo of Daniel, age 4, holding a handmade card that said, "Mommy, you're my hero." Behind it, folded neatly, was a copy of my hospital intake sheet from Saturday, time-stamped 10:47 a.m., just about when their mimosas were being served. Ashley looked at it, looked at Daniel, then back at me, and her eyes filled with tears. She said nothing, but her face said enough. Daniel finally opened his mouth to speak, but I was already stepping back. "I just wanted to remind you both," I said calmly, "what family looks like when it shows up." Then I turned and walked out into the cool California night. I didn't stay to see who followed. I didn't need to, because that night I had shown up for myself, and that was the first step in rewriting more than just a will. When I got home that night, the porch light I'd left on for myself had gone out. Blown bulb, I guessed, but it somehow felt symbolic, coming back to darkness. I didn't bother turning on the living room light either. I just walked inside, placed my purse on the entry table, and sat in the quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't sip wine or rewatch old sitcoms for comfort like some people do when they feel alone. I just sat in that stillness and felt everything. The heaviness in my chest was no longer physical. It wasn't the aftermath of surgery or anesthesia. It was the ache of being forgotten by someone you once carried inside your body. Around 11:07 p.m., my phone buzzed for the 5th time. Daniel. The last message had come in with a timestamp that matched my Lyft ride back home. I stared at the glowing screen for a long while, then flipped it over so it faced the table. I didn't listen to the messages. Not yet, because part of me already knew what they'd say. "I didn't mean it that way," or "You could have told me it was serious," or the ever hollow, "I've just been so busy." But emergencies don't wait for convenience, and neither does heartbreak. The next morning was quieter than usual. I brewed my coffee like I always do. Medium roast, splash of oat milk, cinnamon on top. I sat by the kitchen window watching squirrels hop across the fence line like they were late for a meeting, and I let the scene settle me. At 10:03 a.m., there was a knock at the door. I didn't need to look. I knew that knock. It was softer than a stranger's, but tentative, like guilt wearing shoes it didn't quite grow into. I opened the door. Daniel stood there in jeans and a sweatshirt that looked slept in. His hair was tousled, not styled. He held a paper bag from Leona's, the little bakery near downtown that used to be our Saturday ritual spot back when he was in college. "Hey, Mom," he said, voice low. "Can I come in?" I didn't speak. I just moved aside and let him walk in. He placed the bag on the counter. "I brought those cinnamon scones you like, and some of those weird chai things you always order." He stood awkwardly, waiting. When I didn't respond, he sighed. "I messed up." Still, I said nothing. I just raised an eyebrow and gestured for him to go on. "I should have been there," he continued. "I should have called. I didn't even check in after you told me about the pain. Ashley and we were just planning this dinner for weeks and—" "Stop," I said, finally breaking the silence. He looked up, startled. "I don't need an itinerary," I said. "I don't need an explanation, Daniel. I need honesty. I need to know when exactly I stopped being the person you'd cancel plans for." His eyes welled up. "It's not like that." "No?" I asked, because it felt exactly like that. He sat down slowly at the dining table. "I think I've been pulled in too many directions," he said after a pause. trying to make Ashley happy, keep her family happy, keep work happy, and somewhere in all that, I forgot how to keep you close. That part, I believed, because life does that to people. They don't stop loving you, they just stop choosing you. And if you're not careful, you end up on a shelf, gathering dust in someone's mental attic. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you'll give it. I took a deep breath, walked over to the mantel, and picked up the envelope. I was going to change this, I said, holding it out. His face turned pale. Is that? My will, I nodded. But after last night, I'm keeping it just the way it is. For now. I wasn't playing games. I just needed him to understand that love without presence is like a check that never gets cashed. Intentions are lovely. But I've lived long enough to know they don't buy groceries or warm your hospital room when everyone's gone home. He looked like a child again, shoulders slumped, voice small. I want to do better, he said. Really, I know I don't get a clean slate, but maybe. Can we start with brunch next weekend? Just us? I looked at him, really looked. For the first time in a while, I saw my boy beneath the grown-up veneer, flawed, distracted, messy, but trying. And that counts for something. Brunch, I repeated slowly. He nodded. I'll even drive. No excuses. I let a small smile break through. Bring flowers, I said, walking to the kitchen. I like lilies. He let out a breath of relief, but I wasn't done, because forgiveness isn't a door you just fling open. It's a hallway, one he'd have to walk down slowly, and I'd be waiting at the other end. You know that gut feeling you get when something just feels off? I had it all Saturday morning. I had woken up early, maybe too early for someone my age, with a sort of quiet hope bubbling inside me. I wore my soft sage cardigan, the one Daniel once told me brought out the color of my eyes. I even curled my hair a bit, not too much, just enough to remind myself I used to be a woman who wore lipstick on Sundays and turned heads at county fairs. I got to Cafe Willa 15 minutes early and asked for a table for two by the window. It was one of those spots where you could smell the croissants before you opened the door. The waitress poured me a coffee and said, "He's lucky to have a mom who still wants brunch." I smiled politely. "He used to think I hung the moon," I replied, staring out the window. 15 minutes passed, then 30. I called. No answer. At exactly 12:48 p.m., my coffee had gone cold and my heart had gone numb. I paid for my untouched muffin and coffee and walked out without saying a word. I got home, slipped off my shoes, and sat on the couch. No tears, just silence. I stared at the envelope with the will inside it. This time, I didn't just think about changing it. I stood up, pulled out my pen, and opened the drawer where I kept my lawyer's business card. But life has a strange way of turning just as the ink touches paper. At 2:16 p.m., I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, this is the ER nurse at San Gabriel Valley Medical. Your number was listed under emergency contacts. The owner of this phone was in a car accident about 40 minutes ago. Please come immediately." My whole body froze. I stared at the screen as my breath caught in my throat. It was Daniel. I didn't think. I didn't pack. I just grabbed my keys and ran out the door. When I got to the hospital, I was told he was still in the emergency room. Internal bleeding, some broken ribs, a mild concussion. They said the seatbelt saved him. I sat in the hallway, pacing back and forth like a trapped bird. I must have worn out a patch on the floor with how many laps I took. I tried calling Ashley twice. No answer. The second time it rang until it clicked to voicemail. So I waited for nearly 3 hours. At one point, I went to the nurse's station and asked, "Did anyone else show up for Daniel Lewis?" They checked. "No, ma'am, just you." That broke something in me I hadn't even realized was still intact. Finally, the ER door swung open and a doctor came out. "Mrs. Lewis?" I stood up quickly. "His mother," I clarified, breath caught in my chest. "He stabilized. You can see him now." I walked into the cold, sterile room, and there he was, my boy. pale, bandaged, hooked up to tubes, but breathing. Thank God, breathing. When he saw me, the corners of his mouth trembled. His voice was hoarse. "Mom," he whispered. "Is Ashley here?" I shook my head gently. "I called. Twice. She hasn't come." His eyes darted past me to the door, then lowered. Something in him collapsed in that moment, and then, like a child, he began to cry. "I thought she'd come," he said, his words catching on his breath. "I thought she'd be here." I walked to his side, gently cupping his face the way I used to when he had nightmares at age 8. "I came," I said softly. "Your mother came." He reached for my hand and held it like it was the last steady thing in a tilting world. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I treated you like you were optional, like a backup plan. And God, you came running." I bent forward, kissed his forehead, and wrapped my arms around him as he trembled. "You're my son," I whispered. "You'll never be a backup plan to me. Never. I could never abandon you, even if my heart has every reason to." He broke down right there in my arms. "I didn't want to ruin my second marriage," he said, choking back tears. "I thought putting Ashley first meant proving myself. I thought that's what a good husband does." "And did she come?" I asked gently. He shook his head, tears rolling freely. "She didn't." We stayed like that for what felt like forever. His head on my shoulder, our tears falling together, two broken hearts trying to mend something that had long been cracked. And in that moment, I wasn't just his mother. I was his reminder of what love truly looked like. Unconditional, steady, showing up even when it hurts. Daniel was discharged 4 days after the accident. I had been with him every single day, through the MRI checks, the medication adjustments, and those long, awkward silences when we didn't know how to talk about the elephant in the room. Ashley never came. Not once. Not even a text. The night before his discharge, he turned to me while I was folding the blanket at the foot of his hospital bed. "Mom," he said quietly, "she's gone, isn't she?" I sat down beside him, smoothing the fabric in my lap. "Only she can answer that, sweetheart." He swallowed hard. "I don't think I'd even blame her if she was. I haven't exactly been easy to love." I turned and looked him straight in the eye. No one's easy to love all the time. That's not the point. The point is, you don't walk out on people when they're lying in a hospital bed. He looked away, blinking fast. I paused. "I buried your father alone, Daniel. I handled your wedding while grieving him. I sat alone in a hospital room after my gallbladder burst, wondering if my only child thought I was inconvenient." He winced like my words physically stung. But I didn't stop. I needed him to hear this, not out of spite, but because the truth had been waiting in my chest for too long. I never expected perfection from you. I just expected to matter. When we got to his house, there was no one home. No lights on, no candles burned down, no scent of her perfume clinging to the throw pillows, just silence. A folded note sat on the kitchen island, held in place with the key to the front door. "Daniel, I need space. I don't feel emotionally safe or stable in this marriage anymore. I need to be with someone who sees me, not just someone trying to prove they've changed." He read it twice. Then slowly, he sat down in the chair like every bone in his body gave out at once. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He just sat. And I did the only thing a mother can do when life guts your child right in front of you. I made him tea. That first week was quiet. He didn't talk much, just shuffled between the couch and the bathroom. I stayed with him, sleeping in the guest room, cooking meals that often went untouched. I made roast chicken one night, and I swear when I brought it out, his eyes welled up, not from the food, but from the fact that someone cared enough to make it. On the 7th night, we sat watching an old episode of Columbo when he suddenly said, "I don't deserve you." I turned to him. "Maybe not, but you have me." He cracked a small smile. "I want to be better, Mom. Not for anyone else. For you. For myself." He paused. "You were always there, even when I tried to erase you to make someone else feel like number one." I reached over, held his hand, and yet, here I am. Weeks passed. He slowly regained strength, and somewhere in between the reheated casseroles, the late-night TV marathons, and the quiet walks to the mailbox, we found each other again. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. He asked me what it felt like to get older and feel invisible. I told him. He asked me if he had broken my heart. I said yes. He apologized, not with flowers or jewelry or performative hugs, but with consistency, with showing up, with dishes done without asking and birthday reminders written in Sharpie on the fridge. One day, he walked into the kitchen holding the envelope with my lawyer's business card. "Were you changing your will?" he asked softly. I looked at him. "I was." He nodded. "Because of me?" "Yes." Another pause. "Did you change it?" I smiled. "Let's just say I added a note." He tilted his head, confused. "What kind of note?" I looked him in the eye. That forgiveness isn't weakness, and sometimes the biggest inheritance you can give your child is a second chance. He sat down, shoulders shaking, and for the first time in a long, long while, he wept without shame. We still live separately. He's rebuilding. He goes to therapy. He volunteers at the shelter once a month. And every Sunday, without fail, he drives me to brunch. Same table, same spot by the window, same waitress who now knows our order by heart. And every time I look at him across the table, I think he finally understands. He chose her once, but I chose him always. And in the end, that choice made all the difference.